Hello, Fiona.
Hello.
And everyone else that's watching. We're just weeks, really, away from the Holyrood election. It's getting closer and closer. We've been looking a bit at what's being said by various parties about what sort of campaigns they're going to run. Now, the SNP have definitely got their campaign up and running. There's been a couple of events recently that, it's kind of started off the blocks, as it were. But there's probably more than one thing, but there's one thing in particular that we kind of have questions about, isn't there?
Yes, and a lot of people have questions about, and a lot of people have opinions on as well, which is this question of what is a mandate? In a PR system, should we be looking for a majority, which the system is designed not to produce? Should it be a majority of independents supporting parties? Because that means you've then got cross-party support, and that is what PR is supposed to produce. But that doesn't seem to be what the SNP is going for, does it?
Exactly. It's exactly. And I'm going to have some clips, but there does seem to be, it's a definite, position that's been taken up. As I understand it, the position is, in 2014, we got a referendum arranged through the Edinburgh Agreement with David Cameron, and the necessary reason for that was because there was an overall majority of SNP MSPs in Holyrood. The argument then goes on, because that happened then, and that was the reason we got the referendum, that is therefore what we need to do this time. Now, okay, there's a certain logic to that, but you got to go back to the initial premise and say, well, was that really why we got a referendum? Because there was a majority of SNP in Holyrood? Mm-hmm. It was a factor. Of course it was a factor. But was it the main, was it the necessary factor? And as you said, it's not a first past the post parliament, it's a proportional parliament. Yeah. It's set up so that parties, who are in alignment, work together, and the Green Party, Scottish Green Party, and the Scottish National Party are in alignment over independence. Is that not what the necessary kind of basis would be for another election? Now, there's other things that come up from that, because some of you watching this are probably saying, but we've had a majority of Greens and SNP for years, and Westminster just keep saying no. So that's true, but we'll come back to that. Let's have a look at what Mr. Swinney's been saying. This is the event that happened at Oranmore. It's just a few weeks back, and it's one of the events to get the campaign up and running and go. You could go along if you're an SNP member, but to be honest, it was more of a press event, I think.
It was on YouTube, so if anybody wants to watch it, you just Google it, you'll get it, or we'll put the link underneath this. So the first clip, there was no surprises, I didn't think, in the main speech. And where we're going to pick it up is from the questions. So I'm going to start with John Swinney's answer to a question, which I thought was really good, actually, because it sets out, really why should Scotland be independent, which is a bit of a scene setter.
Challenges of the cost of living are issues that we address insofar as we can within the Scottish Government. So there's a number of different steps that we've taken, whether that's been about trying to lowering the cost of living through the abolition of prescription charges, or the provision of free bus travel to over 2 million people within Scotland, including under 22s in Scotland, which is an incredibly popular scheme, or the steps that we're taking around about the provision of early learning childcare, or around about the abolition of tuition fees for universities. And of course, in recent months, we took a further step with the abolition of peak rail fares. So for anyone travelling from this city to Edinburgh on a daily basis, their travel costs at peak times were halved as a consequence of the actions of the SNP government. So we will take steps insofar as we can to reduce the cost of living, and we'll reflect on that and set out our proposals in the budget next week. But the underlying challenge for people in Scotland today is that standards of living have not increased since the financial crash in 2008. So the UK has gone through this period of stagnant activity, stagnant position on incomes. And what I'm saying is that when you look at other countries, that's not the case. And if Scotland had the prospect of independence, we would be able to use the wealth of Scotland to create a higher standard of living for the people of our country. It's not something that's untested. It has been delivered in other countries, and we should emulate that success and take it forward. So the Scottish Government will do all that we can within our devolved responsibilities, and we'll set out proposals in the budget next week. But I have to be straight with the public that we cannot overcome the weaknesses of the United Kingdom, the inequality of the United Kingdom, the fact that the United Kingdom economy is broken. We cannot overcome that within the United Kingdom. We need the fresh start of independence to enable us to do that.
So far, so good. I thought that was a good answer.
Actually, I mean, it's good to take the opportunity to give a list of some of the main ways in which the SNP has policies that they've introduced in that way. And I also thought it was good that he said towards the end, it's not like this hasn't been tried and tested. You just have to look at other small countries in Europe and you'll see that, they run themselves and they do a lot better than the UK does for their citizens. So all of that's good. The other thing I think is good is that he didn't use the phrase, but he pretty well said we've got one hand tied behind our back, or we've got a foot chained to the UK. So we're limited in what we do. So that was only a few minutes. I mean, I thought that was really good.
Yeah. And interesting that he referred to it's been tried and tested, because this is the whole nub of the argument about the mandate thing, isn't it? So let's just hear what he said at that event about what's a mandate.
We need a referendum that will be recognised by the international community. In 2011, Scotland secured a referendum when the SNP won a majority. It worked in 2011 and it will work in 2026. So on May the 7th, the SNP's aim is not just to win. Our aim is to win the overall majority that secures Scotland the right to choose our own future. That is our task.
That is where we depart from agreeing with Mr. Swinney.
And I mean, absolutely, as we said in the intro, absolutely fine that his party should try and maximise their vote.
Yeah, of course. Of course, that's what they want. And I mean, obviously, if they were to get an overall majority in Holyrood, well, it makes things easier from their point of view running the government. They don't have to they're not running a minority government, they're running a majority one. So absolutely agree with that. But when he draws this, he says, well, in 2011, we had a majority. That was why we got the referendum. Okay, because they had a majority, or there were probably Green MSPs who also voted for it. Therefore, they could pass in Holyrood. They could pass the resolution to seek a referendum. Obviously, that had to happen in Holyrood before anything else could happen. So clearly, they needed a majority of votes to do that. As it happens, they had a majority overall. But that wasn't the only factor that was affecting David Cameron. I mean, David Cameron was probably looking north and going, hey guys, independent support is only about 24-25%. Let's do this. Let's have the referendum, and that'll be done and dusted, and we don't need to think about that again ever.
That'll kill Indy dead. That's what he thought at the time, wasn't it?
And I mean, that's from Cameron's point of view. That was perfectly kind of also a logical thing. And so there was a whole group of causes and conditions that brought about the Edinburgh Agreement. And it certainly wasn't the case that the one and only thing was having a majority.
And as we'll see as we go on, the other part of that question, and even if it did, it was that binding on a future government.
Yes, that's right. Well, that's true. Yeah.
But the other thing that immediately on this was demonstrated on this event that we've just shown the clip from, Swinney has set himself a trap, which he then walked into. Because one of the first questions he got asked by the press was this one.
Can you be explicit this morning that if you fail to win a majority in May, that rules out a second referendum for the next 5 years? And will independence be page 1, line 1 of the manifesto as it was in the general election?
I don't think I could be any clearer that the opportunity of independence is going to be utterly central to the SNP's election campaign. Utterly central. It will be at the core of our argument, and I set that out in the course of the last few months in the discussions that took place at our party conference, and I reiterate it today at this moment where we are 122 days from polling day on May the 7th, and that's what will be at the heart of our campaign. So in whatever layout the manifesto takes, let me be crystal clear, that will be the cornerstone of the SNP's election campaign. And allow me, Ewan, to concentrate on the winning of the election, of making sure that I appeal to people in Scotland with a message which is that if we want to take forward the opportunities of independence, we have to be prepared to deliver the emphatic vote that will bring that about. And that's what comes from electing a majority of SNP MSPs at the Scottish Parliament elections on the 7th of May, and that will be the proposition that I put to the public in that election.
So he doesn't quite answer the question, does he? And fair enough, that is his proposal as the leader of the SNP. But we're asking him to deliver a mandate. In fact, we're asking the Holyrood to deliver a mandate on behalf of the Yes movement. So that includes any party that's got independence. And obviously the Greens are looking as if they're going to get 9, 10, maybe more seats, which between them, hopefully, is a mandate. Why is that not good enough, is the question.
I mean, I think that response was good in the way that he was absolutely, implacably saying independence is at the core of our campaign.
Yeah,
and hopefully that will stop some of the, I don't know, what would you call it, niggling kind of goes on at the edges of the Yes movement, where people come up and say, oh, the SNP, they've lost interest, they only want to be there to get their fat salaries, which, to be honest, isn't that fat salary. So hopefully, that kind of stuff will just quieten down a bit, because it's not very helpful. So that was good. But yeah, the question was, if you don't get it, does that put independence off for another 5 years? And he did not answer that.
And you just know that is exactly what's, in the same way as once in a generation is still being used, a generation later, that will be used.
Yeah, exactly.
So why give them the stick to beat you with when you don't need to? Yeah.
And also there's a kind of, sense that it's, there are a lot of people who will vote for the Scottish Greens. I mean, I'm only focusing on the Scottish Greens because they're the only other party, apart from the SNP, who will get MSPs. I mean, Alba not looking likely, ISP not likely. I mean, maybe the Scottish Socialists, we would like that, you and I, but again, probably not likely. So when he says it's just, SNP, it's kind of like he's being a bit disrespectful to the Scottish Green Party and the people who want that and who want a party in who's, to be frank, a bit lower left-wing than the SNP are.
That's exactly right, actually. And he didn't say it in as many words, but the implication is don't vote for these other parties, vote SNP if you want independence. But the thing is, I certainly would prefer, I don't like a party with a majority. I liked it when you had an SNP minority. I like the Greens in coalition with them. I'm quite happy with the Greens forming ad hoc coalitions with them, but they have to work harder when they're a minority party, and that's good.
Yeah, it is good. It is good. And I mean, interesting that you said, this we need a majority is going to come back and bite them in the same way that the once in a generation has, because there was an example of that just in another interview, wasn't it? With was it Martin Geisler?
There was Martin Geisler and Rachel Reeves. We've got that.
If the Scottish Government win a majority at the Holyrood elections in May, John Swinney says that gives him a mandate to come to your government and demand another independence referendum. Will your government, are you in a position to say with any more clarity this morning whether your government will respect that mandate or not?
I can be very clear. There won't be another referendum. When there was a referendum just a few years ago, it said that this was a once-in-a-generation referendum. People gave their verdict then. We don't need another one. And the Scottish Government, whoever is in charge, should focus on the priorities of the Scottish people.
Your answer is interesting. How long do you think a generation is, Rachel Reeves? How long do you think You can't keep saying in perpetuity we've had a referendum if the Scottish people keep telling you through an electoral process they want another one. So in what year do you think it's reasonable to say, right, enough time has elapsed, you can go again if that's what the people want? When will that time come?
It was the SNP themselves who said this was a once-in-a-generation.
How long do you think a generation is?
And I don't, well, certainly not 12 years.
Do you know, I like Martin Geisler.
Yeah, I like Martin Geisler. He didn't need to ask that question. I mean, I listened to the whole interview, and it was mostly about mostly about the budget and what might have been in it. But he didn't need to ask that question, and good for him for doing it, because that is very clear. I mean, there won't be one. You're not getting one, guys.
Under any circumstances, even if you get every single vote. And I mean, whilst it makes you want to punch the screen and just say, you arrogant, in some ways, it makes me think how poor the arguments are that come from down south. And we had a similar instance, was it The Rest is Politics not so long ago, when they had John Swinney on as a guest, and at the end of that interview, they had a little bitch amongst themselves about how terrible it would be if Scotland was independent. And it was nonsense. It was ridiculous attack lines that had been debunked back in 2014. And their arguments and their thinking had not moved on any, and neither has hers.
That's true. Well, they haven't got a very good argument. They haven't got a good argument to keep the UK as it is. And I mean, she sort of goes, well, it was the sorry, I can't do a Rachel Reeves accent, but it was a Rachel Reeves saying, oh, well, it was the SNP themselves who said it, meaning, Alec and Nicola who said it. And, that's what they said. So there you go. Well, I mean, God, everyone with a bit of common sense knows that it was rhetoric. It was a way of saying, look, guys, this is really important. This is our chance. Let's take it. I mean, we know that. And sensible people agree with that.
It is a opportunistic interpretation of campaign rhetoric, which for me, it seemed to be about encouraging people to vote because they might not get another chance, rather than any sort of intention to create a promise. You wouldn't seek another one for a generation, whatever that is.
And actually, there was I think it was in the general election that Boris Johnson won, which one was that, 2019, 20, something like that. And he used the phrase, he was using it with respect to, because, Commons had been completely stymied for years trying to get the Brexit thing going. And he started to use that language, but that's conveniently forgotten about. But we know we're not the only people who've got grave doubts about the wisdom of going for, we need to have an overall. Absolutely no problem with Mr. Swinney and everyone else in the SNP saying, we want as many SNP MSPs as possible. Fine. No one's going to argue about that, but we've definitely got our doubts about this. So have we got anybody else's views about?
We do. I've got 3 different sources. The first one is Professor Aileen McHarg, constitutional lawyer, and this was part of a speech she gave at the Independence Forum for Scotland, which was back in November. We're going to follow that with Nicola McEwen, a professor who was giving evidence to the Holyrood committee, which asked the question about what's the legal route out of the UK. We will come back to that committee at a future podcast. And we've also got a little clip from a discussion that the Institute of Government held just the other week. So this is 3 views on whether that is a majority binding even on the SNP. So first of all, let's start with Aileen McHarg.
Main lines of argument. One is the very recent one which has been made, saying that if the SNP win another overall majority in a Holyrood election, then the Edinburgh Agreement would stand as a legally binding precedent, meaning that there would have to be another transfer of power to hold a second referendum. Now that, I think, rests on a legal doctrine known as legitimate expectations. That means that sometimes things that have happened in the past can raise expectations about what should happen in the future, and sometimes the courts will recognise and enforce those expectations. But I think it is extremely unlikely that the Edinburgh Agreement creates any sort of enforceable legitimate expectation. What the courts will require is normally something that looks like a very clear promise, and there is just nothing like that in the Edinburgh Agreement. It was a one-off. There was no indication that it was intended to be anything more than that. And in any case, legitimate expectations can be overridden if there's a good reason to do so. And I think on something like this, the courts would not want to touch it with a barge pole. They would be very, very deferential to the decision of the UK government.
So
want to touch it with a barge pole.
Yeah. Nothing there that says you have to abide by it because it was a binding precedent.
She's very, very, very clear, isn't she?
She is. And this is another very clear lawyer. This is Nicola McEwen.
David Cameron, I think it was a judgment informed by the state of support at that time that he made the judgment. But I also think there was something about the majoritarian political culture in the United Kingdom that recognised that a majority was a majority, and therefore a right had been earned at that time. Now that doesn't mean, and as I said this in my evidence, I think that because that was his judgment at that time, that doesn't set a precedent that we would expect to be followed by any subsequent Prime Minister faced with the same choice.
So two lawyers, neither of them think it's a precedent, but there was an interesting thing she said there, which was about something to do with the majoritarian mindset. And again, we have not moved on from first past the post, if that's the way they're thinking, because PR systems are not majoritarian. You shouldn't get a majority. They're designed not to have one. So the fact that it's only that they're holding up as the winning point is weird.
Yes, and also a strange, if we go back to 2011 when that Edinburgh Agreement was getting put together, I mean, Cameron was in a minority government along with the Lib Dems, so he'd had to, obviously he didn't want to do that, but he'd had to do that the way that the general election had turned out. And I suppose also maybe we need to take into account that at 2000 for that Edinburgh Agreement there was a bit of a fluke. I mean, we know that. I mean, we've heard Dave Thompson talking about that because he was the last SNP MSP whose election was confirmed, and there was a little bit of wrangling about that at the time and vote counting. So he was, he was the one who was the final MSP to be confirmed, and that gave them the overall majority. So fine, but also there was Alec. There was Alex Salmond. There was Alec, and his temperament would always have been ebullient and inspirational. This is not a criticism. And once he had the majority, he'd kind of go for it. He's not the kind of guy who was going to sit there and go, and by the way, we've also got 4 or however many it was, Green MSPs, and they agree with us. Was, that would also have been part and parcel of the momentum back then.
Very much so. I mean, the other thing that I think Cameron, his book, when he was talking about that, he did mention that, the polls, it didn't look like it was going to amount to anything anyway. But he also said something about they were worried about the response if they said no. Now, I don't think they're worried anymore. There was a time when they were frightened of and respected the Scottish government. Now they know they can just walk all over us and there's nothing we can do about it, is the impression.
Yes, well, unless Mr. Swinney's got a wee plan,
Well, let's hope he's got a wee plan.
Back of a napkin and in his back pocket that he isn't telling us about. By the way, if he does have a plan, it's perfectly reasonable that he won't be telling anyone about it. That would be absolutely, of course, that's what you do. You're not going to tell everyone.
It wouldn't be a secret plan if he told us what was in it.
He doesn't need a plan. He doesn't need a plan. And I think it would be good if he kind of, I don't know, put the frighteners on the Labour government and said in one of these questions, because they're going to carry on asking him that question. He's got to have a better answer for it. And, why not at the end go, and, don't think we haven't thought about that. And of course, I'm not going to stand here and tell you what we're going to do, but, be assured that we have a plan. You just
don't use the word plan. Say, don't think there won't be consequences, because there will.
That's a better way of doing it. Yeah, there will. Yeah.
Okay, and so this is the third. This was a very recent discussion. The Institute of Government.
Very much so. I mean, so the SNP position under John Swinney is that yes, I mean they of course have to put independence sort of front and centre in the manifesto. Partly for party management reasons, but the line they're taking now, which is a change actually from the Sturgeon position, is that a majority of, if the SNP were to win an absolute majority in the Scottish Parliament, which the electoral system makes very difficult, though not impossible, that would be the point where they would claim a mandate for another independence referendum. That was what happened in 2011. So John Swinney says there is a precedent for that. SNP majority means Westminster has to allow us to vote again. Of course, that was a political decision taken by David Cameron, setting no legal or really constitutional precedent. And if that were to happen, seems quite likely that the government here would simply shrug and say, once in a generation vote, not the time for another one, etc. And in any case, the polls do suggest most likely outcome is a minority SNP government. Yes, maybe with support from the Greens, who of course favour independence as well.
So the likely event is that the government would just shrug, even if they were to get it, an overall majority. Mr. Starmer and Rachel Reeves and all the rest of them would just go, yeah. So what? Who's next?
And at the same time as saying it's not binding, they're going to throw in our faces the equally or more unbinding once in a generation. Neither of these things are binding.
You and I came across it's an article just out, I think, on Bella Caledonia. It's by Mike Small,
yes.
and it's very good. And I was. There's a paragraph in it that struck me when he's just making the point that whatever happens when Mr. Swinney, goes and makes the spiel for a referendum, that's the first time that the Labour Party has been in a position of they're being the ones who will decide on that. And I don't know quite why did that strike me. I suppose, and I suppose like a bit of me thinks. It still thinks that the Labour Party is somehow more honourable than the
It's democracy, isn't it?
Reeves, so, obviously, they're not that much more honourable.
No.
They want what they want, and what they want and what they need to stay in power, is England.
And I think before the election that got Labour in, that was part of, I've certainly heard that in discussions about, well, they may be less intransigent than the Tories when we come to go to them asking for a referendum. Well, clearly they're not going to be. And well, Rachel from Accounts, I believe they call her, is...
Rachel from Accounts, yeah.
So, while she, on top of her head, thinks she can issue a blanket refusal, she is denying democracy to the nation of Scotland, if that is our will. That's quite a big thing to be doing as a throwaway line. So we'll see how that pans out. So having got ourselves in a state of high dudgeon about Swinney and what he said... I've mentioned this constitutional committee, the Constitution Committee in Holyrood, and Patrick Harvey asked a question of the Constitutional Secretary, Angus Robertson, about that very question and got a very clear response.
But there's a contradiction as well creeping in the Scottish Government's position that I want to give you the opportunity to clarify. Because you've talked about the party that wins an election has the right to implement its promise. Right at the beginning of the meeting, you used the phrase, when parties win elections on a manifesto promise. I mean, that happened in 2007. Your party won the 2007 election. But it didn't have, even as a pro-independence party, it didn't have a majority in Parliament for that. And so there was no mandate for it in Parliament. More recently, there's been talk about whether a single party majority is the necessary precondition, simply because that happened to be the case in 2011. But then repeatedly through today's meeting, you've also used phrases like when a majority of parliamentarians were elected on a commitment. You've referred to the current parliamentary majority in favour of a referendum, which is not a single party majority in favour of a referendum, it's a parliamentary majority in favour of an independence referendum. So can you just be clear and explicit that the Scottish Government's position is that it's a majority in Parliament, not a single party majority, that demonstrates the mandate to hold an independence referendum?
Well, that is certainly the case, and a majority in this Parliament have voted for there to be a referendum. And that counts for something. It should count for all Democrats and shouldn't be denied by any Democrats. I don't think votes for the Scottish Green Party, a party that has a manifesto commitment to hold a referendum, is worth anything less than a vote for the Scottish National Party or for any other party when it comes to matters in the Scottish Parliament. And that's why I believe that if the Scottish Parliament votes for something, that is what should happen.
That's nice clear.
That's very clear. Do you think he's going to get the sack after that?
No, but I think there needs to be a conversation for sure.
There needs to be a conversation.
Obviously, every political party will want as many seats in Parliament as they can win. But I hope that when the Cabinet Secretary speaks with the other former member of the Smith Commission, who I'm sure he speaks to regularly, the First Minister, he'll reinforce the danger of implying to the people of Scotland and to the other political parties that if a pro-independence majority is returned in May, but not a single party majority, we have to avoid the situation where other political parties or the UK government claim that the mandate being sought hasn't been achieved. And I hope that the Cabinet Secretary will encourage the First Minister to be equally explicit that the mandate being sought is a pro-independence majority of MSPs in Parliament.
I mean, that is the bottom line. Well said, Patrick. And when you think about it, you know, if we don't take that line, what we're actually saying is it's up to Westminster to decide what's an acceptable mandate. But at the end of the day, whether it's an SNP majority or a majority of pro-Indy parties, surely that's for Holyrood to decide if that is enough, not for Westminster to decide.
Yeah, that's what he was. That pretty well is what Angus has said. But because Mr. Swinney is now saying it's an SNP majority in Holyrood that's the mandate, in a way that's just handing Westminster, you know, a lovely present, because they'll go, well, you said Stu didn't get it, so we're not talking about it. Now, we know, we kind of know that even if they were to get a majority, Westminster will still, you know, shrug their shoulders and not do anything. But at least if you say you're on a much, much sounder footing, if you go and you say there is a parliamentary majority at Holyrood, a significant, and it will be a significant majority by the time you've got, you know, SNP plus Greens, that's a sounder footing to say we have a parliamentary majority. You know, we need to start negotiations about putting that in place. And then if they refuse that, if Westminster refuses that again, because we know, I mean, like us, right at the back of the beginning, we were acknowledging that they've been refusing that for the last few years because there has been a parliamentary majority for independence. But if they do it this time I think if they say no, if they shrug and go, nah, you know, we're not doing it, then there's got to be a big response in Holyrood, but also across Scotland.
Outside of consequence.
There's got outside in the Yes movement. Yeah. Something's got to shift this on, because if you just go, oh, well, and they carry on kind of trying to kind of bring Westminster around, It's not going to work.
Right.
They need to have a plan, and I don't mind that it's a secret plan at the moment, or a secret, or a set of actions that will come in, and as you said earlier, consequences.
But at some point, they're going to have to tell us what they are, because we're going to have to take part in it, presumably.
Yes, exactly.
But
you and I will probably have to be out demonstrating, and
we will
getting
be
arrested.
We'll get a podcast episode out with that.
Bucket list. Get arrested.
Get arrested. Spend a night in the cells, or a cup of tea, anyway. But I mean, the other point, just on which is the stronger case. The number of people who I've heard trying to describe why it was obvious that it was right we should have a parliament in the first place, the devolution one, was because there was cross-party support. Well, surely if you've got SNP and Greens, that's cross-party support.
Yep.
But anyway, so just to finish off this little segment, we put up not pretending this is scientific, but we did put up a poll on our YouTube channel asking which do people think counts as a mandate? And it's only been up for 24 hours, but this is the result so far. Okay, so this is the question we asked. Hi, folks. We're working on an episode looking at the question of what is acceptable as a mandate for another Indy ref. Do you think it should be an SNP majority, or do you think it should be a majority of Indy supporting MSPs? Options were to choose SNP majority as the strongest mandate, which has got 10% of the vote. Majority of Indy supporting MSPs is the stronger mandate, which I see now that I've got a typo in, but never mind, 80%. And then we had neither with another 10%, and the explanations to that, one was either, both are mandates, which I think is fair enough, and the other one I can't remember. So, but that, as I say, not necessarily scientific, but 24-hour poll.
Though. I mean, if
Emphatic,
Mr. Swinney is talking about needing to have an emphatic vote for independence, then that's an emphatic vote, 80%, to say you've got it wrong, Mr. Swinney. But admittedly, only 80% of 30 people. Okay, well, I haven't voted in that yet. That will get us up to 31.
Okay, carry on. Well, what we'll do, we'll leave this poll running, and if by the time this programme airs, which should be next Tuesday, if we've got more votes in there, we'll maybe record a little update to it, or we'll put something in notes or something just to give you the updated figures.
So, great. I mean, that was really good putting that onto the YouTube channel. And if you'd enjoyed hearing, I think particularly Nicola McEwen and Aileen McCarg talking about their kind of approach to that, then we're going to have more of them in forthcoming podcasts, so keep an eye out.
We are, and the thing is, they're both on our side. They're not trying to make life easy for the union. They're trying to give their best guidance to stop us
wasting time,
making things harder than they need to be, making claims that we can't substantiate. So I think it is interesting. Hope you enjoyed that. If you've got any views as to which is the right mandate, please do put them in the comments. We might come back to this topic as we get closer. If any MSPs are watching this who want to give us more of an explanation or come on and explain their stance, please do so.
Please. We've got opinions. Fiona and I always have lots of opinions. You've heard some of them on the podcast, so if you've got opinions, put them in the comments.
We have opinions, but also we're willing to change our opinions if we get different information. So
but I'll certainly change an opinion if I'm given good evidence.
Yeah, absolutely.
I must admit, it takes a wee while sometimes, but good evidence, change your mind.
Thanks for watching.
Great. Bye then.
Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to make sure you're following us and subscribe to us, then you get notified every time we put something new out, so you don't miss anything. That would be great. Also, you can click the little bell if you're watching on YouTube.
And sign up for our mailing list. You can do that from the website, and we always send one out at the beginning of each month to tell you what's happening. Last but not least, you can buy us a coffee on coffee.com.